Welcome. You're tuning in to Conversations with Customers, where we chat with PTC customers and hear their real-world experience of realizing success with our technology.
Hi, I'm Jeff Zemsky, VP of Windchill Product Management. Welcome to today's roundtable discussion on connected systems and discrete manufacturing, and thank you, Eric and Robbie, for joining me. We'll be talking about the challenges facing modern manufacturing and how integrating PLM, ERP, and MES systems can turn data into actionable insights and tangible results. Before we dive in, can each of you talk a little bit about your background and your experience?
Sure. So with 15 years of Windchill experience, a lot of that has been in connecting downstream systems. So it's really about the value of not just authoring the data and keeping it in the system and secured and all that regulation that goes around that, but it's in how do I extend that downstream into all the systems that need to consume that and not reduplicating data. So that's where a lot of the value of these connected downstream systems really comes into play.
Awesome. So I've been working on Windchill for about the past 17 years now, about half as a partner and half leading the product management team for Windchill. And I'd say one of the things I've seen change over that period of time is kind of the different dynamics between ERP and PLM have changed. And we're really seeing a push from our customers on the rising importance of PLM and helping differentiate and bring products to market faster.
Awesome. So as we start to get into this discussion of connected systems, some of the challenges that our customers and businesses that are facing are overcoming things like cost of poor quality, while at the same time they want flexible manufacturing globally and around the world and are facing environmental concerns. What are some of the challenges that you're seeing at customers today?
So it's really about, well, how do I get the data into other systems without so much manual work about inputting that data and or translating it? Because then what quite often happens is that PLM becomes the tool for the design BOM, and then the manufacturing BOM somehow makes it into other systems, but it doesn't look like the design BOM. Well, who did the translation that made it into the ERP system? So then you got this really disconnected process, and everybody's trying to wonder, well, how are we going to control this? How are we going to help manage this? It's not so. Part of that we've talked about in manufacturing discussions about integrating manufacturing process into Windchill. But then it's also then how do I get that data downstream without anybody touching it and or making changes to it along the way?
So as a result of these systems being disconnected, you're seeing quality issues. What manufacturing has doesn't match what engineering has.
Correct. Yep.
Or they're not able to account for their global needs in manufacturing.
Right, and then that also comes into play too, especially, I mean, you bring up like, well, global needs. Like different sites have different needs, maybe that needs different versions of the bill of material. Sometimes that's only because of attribute differences. Sometimes it's because there's actual like raw material changes. And is the raw material even in the BOM? Well, somebody added it into one plant, but didn't take into account the variability that's being used in another plant. So then what am I gonna do? Well, then they say, well, I'm gonna update the BOM and input the one I need at my facility. But then the next time somebody opens up another work order or production order for that BOM, like, well, this doesn't match what I need in my facility. So then you see this churn in the bill of material just for plant-specific changes. And it's like there really needs to be a better way for them to manage this.
So don't tell me, let me guess. You see lots of Excel spreadsheets to help this process flow across the enterprise.
It's just one of the tools that they'll use to help manage it, yes.
Yeah, and one of the things I think is a recurring theme that we keep hearing from customers in terms of challenges in this space is really the need for agility in how they choose to run their business, right? You know, I think historically they've had particular product lines in particular locations, and they say this is where this product exists, this is where we manufacture it, and you can kind of tailor it to that. But there's some changing dynamics where they really want to be able to shift where they manufacture those a little differently than they have in the past, either based on being able to bring the product to market in that region a little bit more effectively, or actually going back to some sustainability conversations we've had, is that actually the nuance of the logistics chain changing the carbon footprint is leading to wanting better agility in where they choose to make things to be able to influence that decision differently than they have in the past, which really calls into question how were they structuring that, right? Because we've historically also had those local ERP instances floating around as well, which makes it all the more challenging if you want to go from manufacturing one location to another. How do I coordinate all of that work and make sure that when I'm doing it up front to launch it, that I can actually change that decision on where we're going to manufacture it down the line?
So on top of that, we have a set of market realities, macro trends that our customers are facing, whether it's that need to deliver, as we discussed, those globally diverse products, maybe made for off the same platform at different locations. How are they managing their challenges in supply chain continuity, and again, making sure those global regulations are tied together? Are we starting to see some shifts in how companies are looking at their tools to help bring together these challenges and these expectations that they're facing today?
Well, first of all, a lot of companies are still challenged with how do I even connect my systems? And then so once they get over that hurdle, then yeah, that's the next step is that now I've connected my downstream system, my ERP. You did bring up the point of multiple ERPs. That's it. That's an even bigger challenge too. How do I handle multiple ERPs? But then usually then that gets into the global challenge. Is I have multiple ERPs because each site inherently had their own instance, or maybe even different total version altogether because I've acquired different companies around the world to increase my manufacturing capability. And then so how do I then even have a chance at using the same BOM or the similar BOM and then be able to globally manufacture it? So then there's tools within Windchill that help you manage that. You got different obviously versions of bill of material you can author. There's also plant-specific data, enterprise data, extended data. And unfortunately, this is also where we get into, well, how much of those should I be looking at? Well, the thing is that there is the tool set there for you to implement what you need. So you implement the right portions of that data model to then support how I'm going to manufacture. So I would want plant-specific data if I have multiple facilities, all of which then need certain attribute information for that particular plant. You can also implement department data to implement extending that value into different ERP attributes I need to drive for supply chain attributes. Maybe it's costing attributes. There's different areas you can get into as far as implementing those kinds of changes to your system.
Excellent. So for the last 50 or 60 years, our CX level teams have been taught that ERP is the key to making sure that their enterprise can run. As we look at these challenges and these market realities, one of the things that we recognize and we're seeing more recognition of in that to fix these broken tool chains, we need to start looking more broadly at our tools. Can you talk about how PLM and PLM adoption is starting to be seen in the need for fixing these broken tool chains?
So with PLM, I think the whole conversation really stems from the C-suite has always relied on ERP to be the value to the company. It's driving their profit and loss and everything. But then what they're starting to realize is that, hey, all of my intellectual property is actually stored in PLM. And that if I want to invest in R&D and new products and get products to market, PLM is where the value is. And with connecting that to my downstream systems, I can now increase and accelerate my time to market. So now I'm going to pour my investment into engineering, producing more product that will eventually make me more money. And then I need to connect these systems so that then that data can flow into ERP and also connect the manufacturing process into PLM. So now PLM is becoming the center core of the value for the company, while ERP then helps manage that, produce it, and then drives the financials for the company.
Yep, and it's interesting. I think there are a couple things at play, right? I think there's some changing dynamics in the ERP landscape that are causing people who have historically gone down a path for the past 30, 40 years of continuing to iterate on that path, being afforded the opportunity to take a step back and say, wait a second, actually maybe let's reevaluate where this process should be existing. And simultaneously, they're recognizing that if they really want to, again, get that product to market faster, there's a lot more they have to cover than just what the manufacturing looks like and how they're going to stand it up, right? They have to reach earlier in the process, as you alluded to, and also manage more of the deliverables that go into the organization, because it's not just about even just the design. It's also about how are you going to service it later. It's also about how are you generating multiple designs off of one common platform. And as a result, they're recognizing that if they really need to build this digital thread across the entire of the company, that they have to start where the product data starts at the beginning of the thread, right? Looking at both requirements and design of if this is where data really starts to live as a manufacturing company, I need to invest in managing that flow getting established and then being able to reach all the way throughout the enterprise.
Right. And I think that some of the inherent initiatives that companies have had to do over I'd say the last 10 years, especially when it comes to digital thread and digital transformation, has made people realize the value that PLM is giving. So like especially look at reach and rows regulations as they're like, well, when I sell a product, I need to make sure I can fit these regulations. And then they're like, well, where do I get the data? How do I know I can pass these regulations? Well, that data is coming from your engineering, which is in PLM. And then that's just one example. As they then follow where the data is coming from, they're now realizing the importance of putting more emphasis on the PLM side of things, because it is what's feeding these downstream systems like ERP.
And I think what you're both touching on is this key of making sure you're leveraging the right tool for the right data to share it at the appropriate times. So as an example, Windchill PLM unlocks and manages the bill of material, the rich visualization, and all the content goes around that. That can share that to ERP at the right time with the appropriate changes. At the same time, ERP can share back things like cost, quantity on hand, quantity on order, so that teams can understand and plan manufacturing, plan engineering change, and close those loops. At the same time, MES can be tied in to, again, drive things like process plans, where issues like items like non-conformance can then be driven up through there. What are some of the other enablers then that we see by having the right tool for the right situation at the right time, and unburdening the enterprise from having to duplicate data or having this person in the middle who's maybe transferring stuff in Excel spreadsheets?
Right. Well, I think what you're kind of getting at, first of all, most companies have to realize that they need to get rid of this duplication effort. So right now they do have people that, like, once data is released from engineering, you have somebody who's then receiving the data. It could be just an email. And then they're having to then input the data into their ERP system. And so that has to stop. And companies aren't starting to realize this until they say, hey, how do I accelerate time to market? Or how do I do more with less people? And then we're starting to connect these systems and then accelerating that process. And then it's also about, well, how do I just manage the workflow of getting this data? Because it's not just releasing the data in your PLM system, but then once I've introduced that to my ERP then has this whole workflow I have to go through to then enhance that data for what ERP needs, and that's to get supply chain involved. So it depends if it's a make or a buy, who's going to get involved. Mm-hmm. I need routings, I need attributes, I need to know who's sourcing it. All of these questions have to be asked, and we have to look at that process end to end holistically.
Awesome. Yeah, and I think you hit on it a little bit earlier. One of the kind of key tenets that I think is important in any digital thread is that, A, the information has to flow without human beings involved. We talked about that a couple times. We talked about this idea of swivel chair engineering, I think, off camera, but it's really the data doesn't just flow one direction, it flows both directions. Because the whole role of the digital thread inside of an organization is to make sure that the data gets into the right hands of the right person at the right time to make good decisions. And that's not just flowing one way. we need to also make sure that you get the visibility of that information on the shop floor, right? That seamless flow of information should go from engineering through manufacturing into the manufacturing environment, but also back. Because if you don't get visibility into what's causing quality problems, what's causing issues, understanding if there's even just a lack of clarity in work instructions can help mitigate that up front. And that's all about this good seamless flow of information.
So what are some examples of some customers that we're seeing gain some value with ERP or these connected systems between PLM, ERP, and MES?
So I think we've got a couple of customers who we've done case studies with who are good examples of kind of seeing that valuable flow of information. Violant's a great case where we're able to dive a little bit further into the details of what a connected PLM and ERP system look like and that seamless flow of information. And we've also got a good case study out there with Vestas, which starts to get into the role of both PLM, ERP, and MES all kind of working together and the vision they have of how that gets realized.
Awesome. And Eric, from your experience, are you starting to see or what are you seeing in terms of this kind of mindset shift to make PLM one of these cornerstone foundations of their connected systems?
Right, and in most companies I'm working with right now, it's all about the value of bringing that data to the downstream systems. And so, MES is starting to become a much more popular system. And it used to be MES stood for many Excel spreadsheets on the shop floor. Fortunately, that's now actually becoming an actual true manufacturing execution system, which is a great thing too. And the fact that MES can now help them facilitate these processes that were so disconnected. Now, the problem used to be is that once I produced the product, we thought we were okay until the customer comes back some year later and say, hey, I'm having an issue with this product number and here's the serial number. And guess what? There's a quality problem on one of the parts. And then I have to go back and say, okay, well, let me find the as-built condition. Well, now I'm having to go through Excel spreadsheets. Maybe I'm lucky I have to go through some scanned PDF files and see what was actually as the as-built documentation. Well, guess what? There's so many quality problems that happen because of that. And so he said, we can't have this anymore of this paper on the shop floor. So MES is really helping to eliminate that problem. Is really, as customers demand higher quality, we also, companies are needing to produce like warranties to the end customer. Well, how am I ever going to be successful at warranting and guaranteeing my product if I can't even capture a true as-built or as-maintained condition of that? Well, these downstream systems help facilitate with that as long as it's getting the good data from your PLM system.
And I think that tees right into kind of good feedback into just that changing dynamic between these three systems, right? It's that, historically that ERP was the center of the world. Okay, where did this data come from? I don't know, somewhere, right? I mean, somebody decided this is what the bill of material looks like. And then what actually happened in the exact environment as you're manufacturing? Okay, maybe we didn't capture that detail, we stored it somewhere else, right? But as both of these have kind of elevated, it's become a little bit more of like a triangle, right, between these systems, where ERP still remains obviously the center of the world from a financial planning point of view. What do we have on stock? How are we managing this? What's the order intake process looking like? But the flow of information of how you decided that was what it looked like, right, what actually happened when you manufactured it, and even the interaction between PLM and MES, it's not through ERP, but it's actually all three talking to one another, that really starts to build that solid foundation that I think is the next generation of what this looks like for all of our customers.
And for that foundation, what are some examples that we can use to help turn that data into actionable insights?
Some of that data is, hey, like if I actually want to give some insights back into engineering about what current inventory levels are at, when I do a revision change on a particular drawing or part, I want to see what the current inventory level is because I want to write the right disposition. So we're trying to get rid of, like, what do they call that? The left behind parts. It's like, well, that's a huge cost of parts in inventory that have now been like scrapped. Well, do I really want to scrap it? Can I consume that? If I have the right information up front, I can actually disposition the part correctly so that I can consume available inventory and reduce part inventory costs, because there's a lot of left behind parts in the warehouse that we would love to be able to handle and reduce the cost of.
So have that greater insight in your change management processes so that the enterprise can make those right business decisions.
Right. And one of the other things too is that part alternates is also another key thing that comes into play. And this is one of those things that's really bi-directional between PLM and ERP, because alternates are authored and maintained in both. Well, I need to make sure that that data is in everybody's hands. A lot of times engineering is the actionable source of what can be an alternate, and sometimes it's the buyers end up putting in that data, or maybe it's between plants that are sharing that data, but everybody needs information and access to that data.
Great examples, and I think that's good visibility into kind of PLM getting a better understanding of what's actually happening in the manufacturing environment, make good decisions. There's also the examples of data from PLM going directly into the manufacturing environment without having to round robin through ERP as well. So things like manufacturing work instructions that should be able to be product sensitive to what is the nature of what I'm making, especially if we think about customers with configurable, complex product lines where every single product coming down the line actually can be different. The need to be able to understand how to combine those or how to create that set of work instructions based on what's coming down the line is another great example of actually MES being able to pull that from the ERP or the PLM system of understanding how that work instruction gets built up.
And then finally from there, we can also leverage capabilities to allow users in an MES to create a problem report to identify an issue or opportunity against what they're working on, to provide that feedback to both manufacturing engineering and design engineering to make the products better, more manufacturable, or reduce defects.
Right, no, that's also very important too. Yeah, having this bidirectional capability of non-conformances is obviously very important and vital, and a lot of people miss that.
Eric and Robbie, thanks for those great examples of how customers can bring together their connected systems, drive that greater value, bi-directional communication, and ensure engineering, manufacturing, and supply chain are working on the right data at the right time. For further insights on this topic, don't miss the ebook Eric helped co-author. A seamless PLM, ERP, and MES integration empowers engineering, purchasing, and manufacturing teams to collaborate effectively, no matter where they are in the world. PTC is here to help you achieve that. Thank you for tuning in.